These borders were not drawn by the people who lived inside them. Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine. Every line on the map was decided in a European office by men who had never lived in the land they were carving up. It was done in secret, in the middle of a world war, by two men with a ruler. And we have been living with the consequences ever since. In 1914, the Ottoman Empire still stretched from the Bosphorus to the Persian Gulf. For 50 years, Europeans had been calling it the sick man of Europe. It was dying, but it hadn't died yet. When the Ottomans entered the First World War on Germany's side, Britain and France immediately began planning what would come after. Britain needed something first: Arab fighters. The most powerful man in Arabia was the Sheriff of Mecca, Hussein bin Ali. He controlled the holy cities. He had influence across the Arab world, and he had a price. In 1915, the British High Commissioner in Egypt wrote to Hussein with a promise: launch an Arab revolt against the Ottomans, and Britain would support the creation of an independent Arab state. A single nation stretching from Arabia to Syria. Hussein believed them. He launched the Arab Revolt in June 1916. While he was fighting Britain's war, Britain was already drawing something else entirely. In London and Paris, two diplomats were sitting down with a map. Mark Sykes was a British baronet, well-travelled, overconfident, certain he understood the Middle East after a few tours through it. He didn't. His French counterpart was Francois-Georges Picot, a career diplomat from a powerful family, determined that France would not leave the war without its share of the Ottoman carcass. Between October 1915 and May 1916, two men negotiated in secret, without telling the Arabs, without consulting anyone who actually lived there. Sykes described the dividing of the line in a war committee meeting with characteristic bluntness. I should like to draw a line from the E in Acre to the K in Kirkuk. In May 1916, both men signed a map. Blue, direct French control. Coastal Syria, Lebanon, Cilicia. Red, direct British control. Basra, Baghdad, the port of Haifa. Area A, French sphere, the Syrian interior. Area B, British sphere, Transjordan, the interior. Brown, an international zone, Palestine. Two men, one ruler, millions of people not consulted. By November 1917, Britain had made 3 separate promises about the same piece of land. To Hussein, an independent Arab state. To Sykes and Picot, French and British spheres carved across it. And now, the Balfour Declaration. A letter from the British Foreign Secretary promising a Jewish national home in Palestine. The same land 3 times. 3 different promises, 1 government. The diplomats who wrote these letters seemed to have believed they could sort it out later. They could not. Bolsheviks seized power in Russia 5 days after the Balfour Declaration. 3 weeks later, tearing through the Tsar's secret archives, they find the Sykes-Picot Agreement and publish it immediately. Investia Pravda. Within days, the Manchester Guardian reprinted it. The Arab leaders who had been fighting Britain's war read it in the newspapers. Faisal, Hussein's son, confronted the British at the Paris Peace Conference. T. Lawrence was translating for him. Lawrence had led the Arab revolt himself. He knew exactly what had been promised. He knew what had been portrayed. The agreement was not a secret anymore. The borders we know today were not drawn exactly where Sykes-Picot had drawn them. At San Remo in 1920, Britain and France redrew the map more carefully. The wartime spheres became League of Nations mandates, a politer word for the same arrangement. Iraq was invented. 3 Ottoman provinces with almost nothing in common stitched together under a single name. Syria was separated from Lebanon to dilute Arab nationalism. The Kurdish regions were divided across 4 states. The promise of a single Arab nation simply vanished. The lines were different from what Sykes-Picot had drawn. The logic, Europeans drawing borders for Europeans over the heads of people who lived there, was identical. In 2014, the Islamic State drove bulldozers to the Iraq-Syria border and filmed themselves erasing it. They called it the end of Sykes-Picot, the name that had become shorthand for a century of grievance. The idea that the modern Middle East was an artificial creation, imposed from outside, built on broken promises. Historians will debate how much blame any single agreement deserves. The final borders came later, at San Remo, through the mandates. They were modified, but the logic of Sykes-Picot, that 2 men in a London office could draw a map and decide the fate of millions, that logic was never modified at all. 100 years later, we are still living inside those lines.